Bonjour.
Hello everyone. Thank you for being so many of you in attendance this morning to help us address this reality, this terrible reality that will be today the CSR, because we have environmental and social concerns, and often when that happens, environment is in the back burner, and we see a backlash on the social and economic front. Is it just a feeling? Are businesses giving up when facing this crisis? If they give up, or if they revisit the CSR strategy, what consequence can it have? And CSR shouldn't be limited to mere talk in the air, but we should actually walk the talk. So for this, we have Ariel Mendez from the Cercle des Économistes, who's at the University of Aix-Marseille. We also have Mario Tepo, who's the General Director of CNP Assurance. You are an important stakeholder in France, but also in Brazil. It's a company with 8,500 employees and 30 million turnover. We also have Olivier Lenel in this roundtable. You are the president and general manager for Forvis Mazars France. This is a group which is specialized in auditing and advisory. You have 41 offices. We also have the pleasure to have Christophe Fanichet. You are the CEO of SNCF Voyageurs, one of the 50 companies in the group of SNCF that deals with the travelers and user services. That's a huge company with 65,000 employees. And Elisabeth Moreno, you are the president of the board of Ring Capital, which is a social impact fund. That means that you only invest in companies that find solutions to social and environmental problems. Ring Capital is B Corp certified. I would like to insist on that. And you were a minister in charge of diversity and gender equality. I won't say more, Ariel, maybe a few words of introduction on this subject of CSR under pressure. Thank you, Séverin. Hello, everyone. Today, we were asked to think about CSR under pressure. If we raise this issue, as already was said, it's because we are in a lot of turmoil today with social issues affecting businesses. Businesses may not find it as a priority anymore. May it be for the corporate world, but also for political decision makers. But before we had some awareness, but since 2022, inflation and instability and AI and tech, high-tech may have put CSR issues in the back burner. However, it is a strategic requirement that should be obvious. Investors include ESG criteria, social governance. We'll have a session on this during the rencontre. So they include these issues in their decision-making process. And we see also more and more legal obligations at the European level, like the CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive that would impact thousands of businesses. What we see today is contradictory trends with more regulations, more obligations. We have concrete actions on the one side, but we also have a climate which is going against the protection of the environment, against civism. And I think this is what we have to keep in mind when talking about this. This period of strong instability, of uncertainties, have consequences for CSR. If we believe the last barometer that was published in 2024, the concern for social and ecological transition has gone down by 34% among economic stakeholders. Maybe not those that are in attendance today, but we are going back to the pre-COVID area, which entails a certain fragility. So I have two questions for you. First, what about the setback from CSR? Is it a good idea? There are a lot of works carried on right now saying that the backlash is actually a double ecological mistake because there are social inequalities that can have short-term and long-term impacts that could be detrimental. We've seen it in Spain. And also another event that is actually struck by important events and what we've seen today, businesses need to be resilient. That means that they have continuous reconstruction capacities. But what we've seen is that businesses that are indeed responsible, not those that actually just talk in the air, those that actually walk the talk, are more resilient because they inspire trust and confidence among their partners. And Linclinger's studies actually show that. So how can we make sure that CSR is not limited to simply lip talk, but lip service? We see a distinction between an old sustainability that would be embedded in a weak sustainability paradigm, a paradigm of business and society, whereby it is built parallelly to the society, and a more recent CSR emerging after the COP21, whereby we embed it in a strong sustainability logic, which is a logic of business in, not a business and logic, but a business in logic, not side by side, but embedded inside the society. So when the CSR strategy of a certain number of economic sustainability is in a weak sustainability, which targets their own economic targets and not sustainability as sustainable development is meant, then it will be in a back end, in a dead end. We need to sustain initiatives. We need to promote virtuous circles. We cannot give up to economic populism. And please, you can understand what I mean here. I think we are fortunate because with us we have virtuous circle examples. Thank you. We'll see if we have the right examples. We have a public insurance company that belongs to La Poste among us, who's got two jobs, finance and investment. Insurance. What does it mean to be socially responsible in a company such as yours? And in which way do you do it? And in which way does crisis, or do crises, recent crises, post-COVID crisis, have made your strategy and CSR strategy evolve? Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation that was given to me. I wanted to participate to this roundtable because as I am a public insurance company within La Poste Group, which is a huge state-owned company, for us, CSR is at the heart of our strategy. Beyond the issues that we encounter today in our organization, against the backdrop of instability, we see that it is indispensable to have CSR at the heart of our business model and not to have it on the side or to go backwards every time there's a problem coming up. We are an investor, and I would like to share three important convictions. First, to be socially responsible, the company needs to integrate CSR issues in its value creation over the long term and not treat them on the side. So it's a cultural issue that goes beyond the issues of structural crisis. And I would like to take, for instance, the demographic transition issue. We know that we have a problem of population aging. And as an insurance company, I would like to talk more specifically about dependence. What does it mean? Costs are going to increase to reach 2.8% of GDP by 2060. And so the question is, what will it entail for us, this issue of dependence? That means that we have to anticipate, we have to adapt our supply, and we need to make useful investments to prevent that risk, but also to try to mitigate this loss of autonomy. We need to create a value chain that would integrate the issues of solidarity, accessibility, innovation, social innovation, to make sure that we mitigate this dependence issue. It's very important. The Caisse des Dépôts and Consignateurs has announced an investment in the ballpark of 25 million euros to fund elderly people issues and health-related issues. As an insurance company, we have acted. As a public company, we have insurance. So we have billions of investments, but we can influence somehow in this way, thanks to investment in an indirect way, 30 billion of a green investment to assist this ecological transition. And we've seen it, but maybe less, via shareholding. We have used our shareholding structures as a tool for strategic influence to make practices evolve. And that allows us to have, in our strategy, to reinforce ESG governance, to encourage decarbonation pathways that are more credible. And also we go towards sensitive issues, and we try to urge companies to have more sustainable practices. We try to be more demanding, to favor long-term strategies to protect our investments. We've seen that how we can both combine the short-term and the long-term to protect the value of our investments. My second conviction, and it's a good piece of news, I have to say, is that environmental and societal issues are also an important driver to stand out on our market and to promote innovation. So as an insurance company, we can and we should actually move the limits of sustainability thanks to our strategy. We are in a world which is more and more unstable, where we need to protect a larger number of people. This is our conviction. We have 36 million insured people, and in this way we can mitigate and pool the risk. I'm going to give you concrete examples to do so. We have launched an initiative last year for people that are affected by breast cancer, so that they can have access to a borrower's insurance at the end of their treatment. That means that in the law, there's a right to being forgotten, which is so we have to wait for 5 years. We wait for the end of the therapeutic treatment, and since we wanted to enlarge this to other cancers, but also to male cancers. This is how we act to promote sustainability. We are also present in Brazil, and in Brazil, we are a comprehensive insurance company on life insurance, but also non-life insurance, but also on micro-insurances. And we have 1 million people with low revenue that are also under our purview. So this is an important field of scope for pooling purposes, for risk pooling purposes. As an employer, and I would like to highlight that, it is a strong driver of collaboration adhesion, because our employees adhere to our policies. It's not a fashion trend. It's actually deep principles and values that are part and parcel of our DNA, and we have a strong adhesion from our employees. And this is why we have the best score on gender equality as well. It's not lip service only. My last conviction, and to go back to what you said, I think that nothing affects our determination. Crisis actually make sure we're not affected by crisis. We are more and more adamant. CSR issues are important to us, even though the situation is not easy. We are convinced that thanks to all this, we can absorb climatic, social mutations, and we can reinforce our model. A company that includes these sustainable policies will be the most resilient ones. I'm convinced of it. And I think that the fate of a company is always linked hand in hand with the environment. And this is why we have to deal with transitions. And when facing a crisis, it's not only a matter of good ethics, but also a matter of good strategy and common sense. We can applaud what she has said, because she's actually showing a beautiful snapshot of a reality. Is it also the truth in a private sector when we have a multi-advisory firm? As Marianne Thépaut said, I'm delighted to be with you today. We managed to get a bit of fresh air, so it's good. As far as I'm concerned, CSR is a compass. It's a compass for businesses, and it's all the more important that it helps us maintain our pathway when we have a crisis ahead of us. It's a benchmark. It's a beacon. And I think that our businesses and our business leaders have more and more responsibilities to cope with. Every year, we have more and more responsibilities. And as you know, in all the surveys carried out with the population, a company is recognized as this first stakeholder of the company, far beyond and above policy and political decision makers. So it's an important role, and it's a good piece of news in a way. To follow up on the introduction, all those that are here in attendance today, I think, would confirm that having a real embedded CSR strategy in the corporate policy is a better anticipation of risks. It means a better resilience, better adjustment, better attractiveness, something that is actually enhanced. We are a specific company. We are 5,000 in France. We are part of professional services companies. We are regulated a company. Our compass brings us to help customers, but also we rely on our talents and the human capital that we develop year after year. We do it for our own sake, of course, with our 5,000 employees, but also with 20% of turnover. You can understand that we do it for the society with a big S, a capital S. And this is our main and most precious asset. I'll give you 3 examples of what we do right now as we speak. Whether there's a crisis or not, we've had more golden eras, of course, in the past, but still. First, let's call hybridization of our employees. Maybe it's going to make you smile, but it means that amidst our activities, we have to teach them some skills. May they be financial, extra-financial skills around digital, data, AI issues. We talk about speaking 3 languages, so it's a lot of investment, a lot of training, a lot of experiments. And this is our promise as an employer for our company and to the benefit of all the branches in the widest sense of the meaning and for the society at large. We talk about skill-based organization. This is the idea of going beyond the French typical formats where we have career paths based on academic achievements, and we try to have dynamic careers based on the acquisition of skills and how to assess these new skill acquisitions. And then I will follow up on another perspective. We also have a commitment to parenting and mixity. We have set up a second parent leave, so for the second parent to be able to have a parent leave that would be paid in full as we would for a mother who's working with us. That's not yet a public measure. As you know, it's not a state measure yet, but we have it in our company. Another pillar, it's legacy transmission, because it is important, as Mr. Mazar's legacy is very important to us. And so we have a commitment towards the young generation, cultural institutions that make and that provide for this transmission of legacy. And then another pillar of commitment and responsibility, it's our commitment to stay in all the French territories. We have 5,000. We're present in 40 offices. And in our industry, we're the last one to offer this proximity and outreach to the outside world with Florence Mazar. Fauvis Mazar is present with 8,000 employees in the US, among others. Thank you, Olivier. Maybe we'll go back to you afterwards if we have some time left. A round of applause to him, obviously. When you were talking about 3 languages, about being able to speak 3 languages, your employees are trained on financial and extra financial data and skills, right? That both sets of skills are important, is it? Yes. They have no choice but to integrate a logic of financial performance with extra financial performance. And we are actually helping them to do so, to include data, AI. We may talk about this later on. With Christophe Fanichet, we'll change sector and we'll talk about another type of format. You are directly in contact with the public at large, the general public. So, in a company of the size of your company, do you manage to put CSR at the heart of your strategy? And in what way does the crisis or have the crises make your strategy evolve? Thank you. Hello, everyone. For SNCF Voyageurs company, we have had 3 stages as regards CSR. First, we had to be made aware of the importance of CSR. Secondly, we had to ramp up our CSR strategy when facing the shocks and the crises that we mentioned earlier. And then we take full consideration of CSR, and with the R of CSR, which actually entails a better management of risks. Awareness raising, as the first stage, was a moment when CSR was on the sideline. And now it's embedded in the heart of the company. We were talking about the digital age. CSR's arrival is often compared to what happened to the digital era in the years 2010, when we had a CDO on the sideline, whose objective, and this is the case of CSR now, is to be a bit of a scapegoat and talking about the issues, but on the sideline, not being part and parcel of all the strategies and policies of the company, always on the sideline. And I think that being aware of the importance of CSR is now a done deal. It was important to become aware of it, and now after the years 2015, 2016. It's part and parcel of our strategy at all the levels. First, the meaning that we give to our strategy, we see it in our hiring practices. We see it in our investments. CSR is part and parcel of our investments. They are more solid, and also with our customers. I'm not going to talk about all the slogans of our company, but this is really at the heart of our policy. And what we really wanted to do is we trained all our managers on CSR, 4,000 managers like for Mazar, and it's part and parcel of their career training pathway. If they do not go through a CSR training, they cannot be promoted. Second stage, the crisis, as you said in your introduction, these shocks, these crises were an opportunity to ramp up on CSR issues. We've had crisis, COVID, the yellow jackets, and how to live together. And we've seen that there were essential issues to address, that there were also territorial gaps, procurement power gaps, and the company has a role to play. And via CSR, this is how we could address it. The company has a role to give meaning to everything for employees, to have a better private life and professional life balance. These crises helped us to see them. And second crisis also, an energy crisis that we had to go through and face. A lot of you are aware of it. SNCF Voyageurs is the first consumer of electric energy. 2% of electric energy of France is consumed by us for the railways, for our trains. And we managed to speed up all our plans in terms of sobriety. That means eco-driving, railway eco-driving, and thanks to that, we managed to earn 7 to 12%, to make 7 to 12% of savings, and that's very important for our company. So after becoming aware of the importance of CSR, we have managed to put CSR at the heart of our strategy. Now, let's talk about the third stage. I think the R is responsibility. It is true, and it's very important.
De RSE, c'est aussi.
I think the CSR era is all about how I manage the risks in my company. So one of the surveys that surprised us was that by 2050, we're told that if we don't pay attention to climate change, up to 25% of our corporate profits could fade away. If we take a closer look, 2030, which is just overnight, it's the 2% of our hours worked will be lost. You can see we've all got fans here, we're using it. You've seen the heat wave we've experienced this week. 2% of hours worked will be lost. So when you look at what we do, train travel, how in a company like ours can we make ourselves more resilient? How can we make the train track more resilient? How can our trains be more resilient? These are realities for us today. One delay in 10 is to do with climate change issues, heat, flooding, wind. All we need to do is look at what's going on in our weather and environment. There are 2 to 3 times more trees falling on the tracks, and so it disrupts our services. So as a company, how do I manage risks? It's not just about my responsibility. So those are 3 phases in CSR. It's first of all, how did CSR move from like the king's fool to say this is what's going on, to how am I going to manage risks for tomorrow, in the future? Thank you very much. Elisabeth Moreno, I'm really sorry because you're in a very uncomfortable role. We've got 3 heads of companies who are saying CSR is amazing. We're talking about training, resilience. They're saying you need to go for it. It's the life of our business is that it's at stake if we don't embrace it. But nonetheless, we all have the impression that financial crisis, inflation, political and geopolitical instability, is meaning that our businesses are facing a lot of risks and they're often focusing in on their core business. You have perhaps a bit more of a cross-cutting vision of these issues and a range of different business sectors. Could you tell me what you think of what I've been saying? We've got the top businesses here in X. Do you think it's maybe not totally representative of what's going on elsewhere in France and around Europe? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to be here with you and to be part of this panel with some highly committed business leaders. You give me faith in the future, and it's interesting that you've asked the question in this way, because I was listening to these guys and I was thinking that I should suggest to Mr. Lorenzi and the team for the Cercle des Économistes this issue of CSR is a real key issue, and I want to suggest that they have a panel where you have two people speaking for it and two people speaking against it, because the reality is if you have just people who are genuinely, sincerely committed to CSR, and I know the issues that these businesses are facing and what each of these leaders are facing, because we know that CSR is an issue of leadership. You've been talking about responsibility. All of the companies that I see genuinely committed to CSR are so committed because it's come from a strategic decision by the business leader and the management committee. All companies that talk about CSR in their marketing and their communications, you'll have obviously noticed that for many businesses, CSR is something that's to do with marketing. These are the businesses that take a step back when things are a bit shaky. There's a lot of them. Well, perhaps maybe not quite as many as all that, I would say. CNP Assurance is a company I know well. For decades, they've been doing lots of different things, and when I say to them, why aren't you talking about it? They said, we don't need to talk about it because that's part of our values. But the thing is that for those for whom it's not part of their values and who only use it as part of their marketing and communication, I think someone once was quoted as saying, culture is a bit like jam. The more you have, the less you spread it about. You could say the same thing about CSR. The more you have it, the less you spread it about. So there are some very committed companies which do a large number of very concrete and smart actions which have real impact on people's life, and they're not talking about it either because they're afraid that people say they're just doing it so they can talk about it, or perhaps because it's so obvious, so it's second nature to them that they don't even need to talk about it. You won't have missed that we're living in a world of incredible paradoxes and ambiguities. All of the different crises we've been facing, geopolitical, environmental, health-related crises, highlight the fragility of our society and our humanity. So the things that we realize is that we are facing a range of contradictions, powerful contradictions. Those companies that have decided to take a step back with regards to CSR are shooting themselves in the foot, not with one but with two bullets, and they don't realize it. And then some companies are just saying, well, whatever, the disaster is coming. But the first bullet they're shooting in their own feet is about confidence and trust. In the period like what we're experiencing today, trust is a vital pillar for customers, for staff members, for everyone who is buying that company's products and services. Trust is a vital pillar. How do you think that Meta colleagues will respond when their leader says they need more masculinity in their businesses? As a woman, if I was working for Meta, I'd be really struggling with that. So what would happen if you work for Accenture and during over the last 20 years, this company has done a number of brilliant studies to say that CSR is essential, and they start to announce that, well, maybe, perhaps we're making a bit too much of it. How would you respond? How would you react? If you were a company like Google that for 20 years or more, you had put these CSR issues at the heart of your activity, and then you say, well, now you've got a lot of business going on in the USA, and if we weren't to work with the federal government, it would be something we were struggling with. Trust is something that takes a long time to build, but can be lost overnight. And the second way in which companies are shooting themselves in the foot is with the realities that they're confronted with. You'll have undoubtedly read articles in the press about companies that are struggling because they've got employees who are refusing to come back to work in the office full time. 30% of employees around the world after lockdowns didn't want to come back to the office to work. Rather than asking why there is such a significant labour relations crisis in businesses, what are the companies doing? They're imposing sanctions, they're imposing rules, they're forcing things, and they're creating unbearable crisis. Have I really run out of time? Don't worry, I'll wrap up quickly. When businesses are built on men and women, real people with flesh and blood who experience inequality, social injustice, struggling with the inconsistency of our era. If you close your eyes to that, you are shooting yourself in the foot, because if you can't attract talent, if you can't recruit, if you can't give your employees a sense of meaning in the work, a sense of purpose, how will you help people to want to work for you in such a tough time? So the reality is that these CSR issues, rather than looking at them as an impact issue which will have a deep, thoroughgoing impact on society, they're being approached as KPI issues, as indicators or boxes to be ticked at the end of a financial year to see have we done it. Most bosses, if you just allow me to finish, most bosses will say it's just something that they are struggling with because these KPIs are stopping them from doing business, stopping them from being competitive. Sometimes it's true, but what are we talking about? We're talking about countries, we're talking about businesses that have the resources to make the world a little bit better than what it is today. So either we can focus on our short-term results, or we need to think about future generations and the state of the planet. We've never seen so many crises: floods, forest fires, bushfires. Look at the weather that we are experiencing. We're having a heat wave that we've never seen before this week. Either we should take our responsibilities as people to say this planet doesn't belong to us, with other people who are going to inherit it from us, and we need to leave it in a clean state, or we will say the only thing that counts is our profitability, and we will drive straight into a brick wall. I'm wrapping up, I promise you, I promise. When people tell me it's difficult, at Ring, that's not what we say. We're not saying we want to be seen as brilliant in our public appearances. When we say to our teams that we say, if we don't achieve 50% of our social impacts on society, we won't be paid. We gave out 250,000 euros to associations, charities that are working on social environmental issues. Why did we do that? Because these associations, even though they are working really hard to do great work, if they don't get the financial resources they need, they won't be able to move out. Our foundation distributes more than 7 million to social environmental causes. Is that a problem for business? No, not at all. It makes the business even more credible. So that's a decision that we need to take together, and no one can decide on things on their own just because business and profit is the most important. No one can decide on the future that we want to build for the future generations. Thank you. What an incredible advocacy. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I wanted to come back to one point. You talk about some of the companies that say they've taken a step back and they're wrong to do so. No, I haven't pointed them out. They've pointed them out themselves. Are they not just tracking with a social society. When have businesses just followed the movement in society? When you create a business, when you look for clients, is it about following what's going on in society? No. You'll say, no, it's not my fault. Do you understand? Everyone's doing it. Is that what you're going to say? No. Where are we going to go if we make those kind of excuses? Thank you. I think we've understood your message. Let's go round the panel once more, quite quickly this time, just to check whether CSR goes beyond words into actions and making a real transformatory difference in society. I'm going to ask each of our speakers to talk about one measure that they are talking about, working on, one issue, one target in their CSR strategy, one thing that they're trying to challenge the public authorities about, something that they'd like to implement in order to boost this societal transformation. Marie-Aude. 2 points that I'd like to raise awareness of. When we talk about indicators, that is an administrative burden. There's the European CSRD directive, which requires 1,000 indicators to be filled in. People talk about simplifying things for businesses, so the small businesses don't have to do it. Businesses are being forced to invest money to carry out reporting, but perhaps simplification would mean 20 indicators, which would be really key, but everyone would have to do it. I think the key thing is action rather than reporting. Second brief point about AI is probably something I'd like to be a whistleblower about. There are incredible opportunities here, but AI can be a way of excluding people. These tools provide a way of selecting all the right risks. If you select all of the right or the good risks, that means that you don't take the other risks, and so that would increase the number of people who are uninsured, and that would increase the vulnerability of our population, our communities. That's true right around the world, and so that's something I think we need to be very careful about. How should we use AI in an ethical way? And that's something that we need to think about right across the world, right across the stakeholders. We've been using AI for 10 years now with a very strong ethical policy, but it does need to be regulated to make sure there aren't abuses. So let's not focus too much on CSRD and let's use AI properly. What about you? What are you working on to move forward? I don't want to say any more about CSRD, but I agree with the idea of simplification, that's for sure. The issue, as you said, is that we need an action-focused CSR. I think that public authorities also have the responsibility to stimulate and facilitate CSR in order to create conditions, stable conditions for businesses in order to take action. Let me give you an example of this. This digital transition around AI is something we've been working on. We've been working on our staff having 3 languages. We've had a training plan. And I think we should welcome the plan that was launched on the 1st of July, just this week, in helping companies and people, employees in SMEs and small businesses in France to dare to use AI to roll it out to 250,000 employees by 2030. We've got scientific champions in this area, but we are lagging well behind in support that we provide to working French people in this area. So I would like us, who are the European champions of production-based taxes, I would like us to become the European champions of AI. We don't want to leave French people behind. Using AI, daring to use AI is great, but we need to go faster and we need to go further. Great. I understand that business leaders want to see stability. Christophe, what do you work on within SNCF passengers? I want to talk about one thing. I want to talk about company cars. 5% of French people have company cars. That's 1.3 million company cars around France. That's part of their salary. There's a tax break. It's It's benefit in kind for mobility. I want to suggest that people don't get a company car, but a company train. Let me explain what I mean. We have many staff members who use their company car because they get it almost free of charge, in inverted commas, and that enables them to do long-distance journeys. I think we could offer company train packages for people who want to take the train because they have environmental concerns. So we need to make a rail credit. A company car was about 10,000 euros. So you could give staff members 10,000 euros to travel by train for themselves and their families. There are other people who use cars for commuting. They don't necessarily need a big 4x4. They could just use a little city car, and we could give them 5,000 euros in train credits. We're ready to do that. It will need a government measure, tax-related measure. It won't require any changes in the overall tax envelope, but it's just a change in the way it's focused. I think we could decarbonise mobility as well. Have you suggested that to the Ministry of Economy? What have they said? Well, I'm waiting for an answer now. Watch this space. It's a great idea. Elizabeth Moreno, we haven't talked about Ring. Have you got enough entrepreneurs to invest in? What do you need to be able to invest more? Let me answer the question. Personally and professionally, everyone wants to change the world, but very few of us want to change ourselves in order to change the world. So we talk a lot about the companies that are doing harm to the world, but I talk a lot about the companies that are doing good. There are lots of great, virtuous examples. 4 of them are represented here. L'Oreal's second biggest market is the USA, and they said we're not going to take a step back despite the threats. Sodexo as well, lots of French companies we can be very proud of because they're doing good and they provide inspiration to those who have wanted to take a step back. I talk about those companies. I think there is hope. There are some people who are doing things the right way. On a professional level, one of the biggest challenges we've got within Ring is to convince investors that we can make money by doing what's right, what's needed for the planet. We've got 470 million euros in funds, and 100% of this money is invested in women and men who found businesses that are focusing on ecological transition, health, financial inclusion and things like that. When you use money to do what is necessary, useful, what is right, and at the same time you can grow your investment, I think it's a virtuous model. But a lot of people think that investing in a social environmental impact fund is doing what the Red Cross does and a charity. No, we're not social workers. We're just people who are full of common sense. Investing 100, 200, 300,000 euros in a startup company which is working on carpooling or car sharing, that's perhaps an intermediate solution between company cars and company trains, like our colleague was just talking about. When you invest in a company that is using big bottles of water for water fountains rather than giving out bottles of water with plastic, if you're working in startups that connect charities and businesses and public policy, when you've got startups that are working on school exclusion, these are vital issues for our future. It's a great way of investing money in virtuous solutions. In France, in particular, we often think that making money is a bad thing, and when we invest things, we put it into savings accounts. It's not investment. Rather than leaving this money dormant, let's invest it to make things better in society, and that's one of the biggest things. So when you think that a social and environmental impact fund can be positive for ourselves, for our society, and for the world in general, I think we will have made a big win. Thank you very much. We need more ring capital, or perhaps we should put our money into ring capital. Yes, we're looking for investors. We'll take everything that you've got to give us. One question, just a quick question from the floor. Sir, you're going to need to be very quick. Good morning. Ms. Moreno, I completely agree with what you're saying, but I've got a question. I'm a financial auditor. I've got companies that are SMEs and intermediate size companies. They were very happy to see the CSRD directive replaced by the Omnibus directive because they want things simplified. How can we help these companies be virtuous? They can't be competitive in price terms because US companies don't have the same rules. They can't play on a level playing field with them. That's an excellent question without getting into technical details, but one of the reasons why business leaders, or some of them in certain cases, are speaking out against CSR is because they think it will stop them being competitive, that they won't be able to compete with other companies. What we need to say that some people think that CSR is a first world problem and that the reality on the ground is very different. What we need to do is to transform this issue of corporate social responsibility into a teaching tool to understand the impact that we can have on society and to make it just easier to use and implement. We need to ensure that public policy supports companies so that they don't lose competitivity. It is a virtuous circle that we need to create whereby companies and the authorities work together to look about how you can simplify and relieve the burden without denying the essential commitments. Thank you very much, Elisabeth. Another question. Mathieu Prix-Dessous, I'm a head of business in Germany, and there is a position from the German businesses to push businesses towards CSR in order to improve productivity. In Germany, which is a very strong exporting country, we see that European regulations can help us to create non-tariff barriers in order to defend our markets against the USA. So in my view, there are two aspects that could respond to what the previous questioner asked. One is focusing on productivity, but also building instruments in Europe in a world where we'll need to protect our markets. So I think CSR is a way that we can use win-win policies. That's a great comment. Let's not forget that as consumers, the best way to help our CSR committed companies is to buy their products. There's no regulation which will make our businesses more competitive than the choices that you make. So if you're interested in these issues, before you buy businesses' products, look at its CSR commitments. That's the best tool we can use to promote competitivity. That's the best thing we have in this world. Thank you very much. I want to hand over to Ariel to wrap up. Thank you, all four of you. Thank you much, Séverin. This has been a very interesting and rich panel. A few things that I've noted. CSR, as Christophe Fénichier said, is not something for tomorrow. It's today. If we don't hold on to it and grip it, it's going to be a disaster. It can be a boost for CSR strategy, but this era is also a time where we see exactly what the true intention of the different businesses are. Businesses have a central role to play in society, and we realize that there have been sessions about what's the business's role in society, but we see clearly that businesses don't just have an economic role. Economics is tied in with social aspects, environmental aspects. It's all connected, and companies invest money, they do things, they're at the heart of this transformation in society. Another thing that I would note is that for companies that are afraid of implementing CSR strategies because it costs money, I have noted that CSR is a way for companies to stand out and be attractive, to attract new staff, attract stakeholders. So companies shouldn't be afraid of CSR. They really need to get hold of the subject and grip it. Another word that I heard is that CSR is about trust. We need to talk about it as well. That jam that Elizabeth talked about needs to be spread. The word needs to be spread because good practices can inspire people and give new ideas for development. I heard people saying that with all measures that are being taken, CSR is not just going to be, should not just be an issue of KPIs and indicators. We need to enable companies to put genuine actions in place on the ground. Thank you very much to all of you.
Bonjour à tous, bienvenue.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this roundtable dedicated to ending poverty. At first, we wanted to speak about poverty throughout the world, but now we're going to focus on poverty in France, how to remedy, what solutions can we find, what solutions can we bring to remedy poverty. Just a few figures, and then I'll give the floor directly to Pierre Jacquet. The figure, which is quite surprising, and maybe to be taken cautiously, it was 38% in 1990, 8.5 in 2024. That doesn't mean that it's not increasing. I will give the floor to Pierre Jacquet, professor at Ponts et Chaussées and a member of Le Cercle des Économistes. Thank you. So, how to remedy poverty? That's the topic of poverty. It's not the first time we talk about it. Every year in Aix, there's a roundtable on how to end poverty, which proves that poverty remains a topical subject, that the strategies adopted are not enough in volume, in nature, in any type of format. But it shouldn't be a way to continue to have empty words without concrete actions. So we have to think about concrete actions that are already set up to help poor populations. The first subject that I would like to address and introduce to you, how can we define poverty? And I will not dwell too much on a definition which is quite widespread, which is the monetary definition. As Pierre said earlier when he gave world figures, it is a version of monetary poverty, which allows to measure and follow up poverty and to see whether progress has been made each year or if there's an upturn of poverty as we saw with the COVID pandemics. I would rather turn towards a more conceptual definition, relying on two notions. First, access to essential needs. That means food, health, and education. And the second notion, inequalities or relative poverty, if you please, which is a permanent topic and it will remain so. That's the distribution of income, which is the implementation of transformation economy, which will have an impact, undoubtedly, on the allocation of income. On these two aspects, I think we would say that we are bankrupt in a way, that we are really the last in ranking. First, because there's a moral challenge. That means the persistence of poverty hotspots in the world and the problem of food safety throughout the world. I think it's a scandal, in my opinion, that we have spent 3 decades to set as a target to end hunger in the world, and for a decade food insecurity has kept on ramping up. And this growth of food insecurity predates the COVID pandemic, and then we had the Ukraine war, which didn't help anything. So we actually had an upturn of food insecurity in the low-income countries. 70% suffer from food insecurity, and 30% are in serious food insecurity, which goes far beyond the amount of dollars per capita which the population might have every day. So despite all the targets that have been set and the Millennium Goals, this was not enough to curb this phenomenon. There's also an economic challenge, namely the spontaneous granularity hasn't been made true. And we see it in France. We have inequalities that stabilized. They plateaued at a low level, and now they picked up again at higher levels. And for me, this is very important, and that shows that financial capitalism does not fill the gap. And we have to work on the side of the state, but also on the private sector side. And we have less and less resources when it comes to budget, because with a lot of constructs. And if I wanted to be provocative, I think we expect from the state so much without taking too much from the wealthy, and we can't make any offsetting on the population. So this doesn't work. And if we want to end poverty, we need to change the economic paradigm beyond these beautiful ideas of sustainable and green growth, which are concepts that are in full trend right now. To wrap up, there's a last challenge, the political challenge. Managing public policy and green transition, as we have spoken in the past, economy, this requires a social consensus that is stable and robust. However, we are facing a deep crisis, and the digging of inequalities, the powerlessness of public policies to curb these problems, to have a social and environmental and climatic transition, this weakens the credibility of the economic model in which we live. And we have a situation where we have the society that puts on the spotlight some issues, and then the political world that seems to work in a different universe that doesn't talk about the real subjects. And this dichotomy is related to our economic model, which has made it come true. We have revenue and efficiency and distribution on the other side, and we should think about the two at once together. It should be a permanent objective, and economic policy should be assessed as to its efficiency, but not only, but also when it comes to ending poverty, inequalities, and taking care of poverty and population segments that are highly impacted by the economic policy. So we should look into what we should do to end poverty and address this problem. Thank you. We are with Augustin de Ramnay de Bonnet, Caroline Chevret, Patrice Doré, Nicolas Joly, and Augustin. What do you think about this aggravation of poverty? We have 5 million of poor people in France, and what Pierre Jacquet said earlier on is very interesting. We have the absolute and the relative poverty. What can you say about this? Thank you, Pierre. Thank you to both Pierres. So indeed, we talk about 800 million and 1 billion poor in the world, and 9 million in France if we take the most widespread indicator, which has a living standard which is the average one, and we talk about 1,200 euros per month. It has improved greatly in the world and France, but it has been going down recently. I'm not going to talk about the figures that Pierre Jacquet said earlier. What we see is that since COVID, and with the growth of, and with the wars breaking out in Somalia, South Sudan, in Ukraine, we have 70 million poor in addition in the world, and the threats on medical aid, policies related to Donald Trump's decisions will take a toll on vaccination of children and the fight against AIDS. That's worldwide. In France, the poverty rate, measured by the fact to have 60%, to have less than 60% of the average income. We stood at 12% of the population before. It went up to 14%. So two observations as an introduction. It concerns the distribution of wealth. It concerns job market, but also social inclusion, which is actually hampered by increased poverty. What can a business leader do? Two observations. First, public powers recognize that they are not the only ones to have some influence on a few fields. I'm talking about caregivers, I'm talking about health. Companies actually deal with that. And when it comes to poverty, You have the Interministerial Delegation for the Prevention of Poverty that published a manual to companies, and I would recommend all the business owners to look into it, because corporations are a venue of proximity, and that could actually help to curb poverty. I'm not going to quote Duflo, but in companies, we can be a laboratory for new experiments. And they recommend to business owners to detect people that are in situation of poverty. For instance, when someone asks you for some money ahead of time, we have to pay attention, we have to say yes, and we can see if we can't help them in terms of accommodation, for parenting arrangements, and so on and so forth. Another example is illiteracy. We talked about the fight against illiteracy. It was a priority. And we realized that amongst the cleaning ladies and gentlemen, we could see that they could not fill a CARF form, and if they didn't have someone in their family to do so, they could not have access to welfare aid. And so illiteracy is a problem also to be recognized and pinpointed. So amongst the large statistics of ending of poverty issues saying that poverty is actually being curbed, well, we have two challenges ahead of us. First, the disengagement of America that actually takes a toll on dozens of millions of people worldwide. And in a country like France, the question of ending poverty requires to work on prevention and not on what I would call ex-ante action. So they have decided to focus on prevention with enhanced action, and I will talk about it later. Thank you, and it's very important to say, because I'm following up on Pierre Jacquet, who was talking about the state as a leitmotiv, as someone being too adamant. But maybe we could talk about the corporate world. What about trade unions? Because trade unions' perspective is important, and I thank Caroline Chevret to be here. There's a specific feature, a prism of public services, and when it comes to poverty, they look at poverty in a different way. Often we say civil servants are sheltered from poverty, they will never be poor, they're protected, they're in a safe haven, but it's not the case. Actually, you have an outlook on poverty that is quite specific and different to the others. Yes, thank you for this introduction and talking about it from the get-go. As trade unionists, we are embedded in the public service sector, FSU. It's the first federation of education, but also we work on territorial services that are directly addressing poverty issues and trying to respond to poverty. But we also have another concern, which is that of the staff. And poverty also concerns staff members of the civil service. Sometimes they are civil servants, and often they are contract-based employees, often women that have part-time employees on an imposed basis and that are not well paid. But what I could say about this, the input I could bring on this is these jobs that are directly in contact with poverty, because the public services in France have a double hat. They have to meet the needs, the immediate needs of those that are facing poverty. That's the role of social workers, whether they are in councils of département or in the board of schools, but also to implement public policies that target to end poverty in a good or less good way for 2 or 3 generations. And this is what we keep in mind, because we have to keep in mind that we have young people in our classrooms that need to get out of poverty when they reach the adult age. You've talked about global figures, but it's also 3 million of children that are under the threshold of poverty. 1 out of 5 children living in families, 40%, sometimes more when they are in special neighborhoods. underprivileged neighborhoods. And it is fundamental to get to know that, because that's the lack of access to fundamental needs. And that weighs upon their possibility to accomplish the public service missions. It seems obvious, but it is important to highlight it. When a child only eats once, namely at the canteen, or doesn't go to the canteen at noon because the money is required to pay the rent, when they sometimes sleep in a car, well, that's part of the things that would prevent the kids from studying properly, and that would drive them even further into poverty in an evil circle. And this is what we have to face. Sometimes we have such poverty that we cannot fulfill our duties. I'm talking about damage caused on health of kids. 18% of young people are overweight, and there's a percentage which is even higher in underprivileged neighborhoods, because quality of food is important. It's important to give some concrete elements on what could happen when we have to face poverty among public services, with the willingness to get out of it, obviously. The management of public services has clear values. They want to get out of relative poverty. We talk about inequalities, addressing inequalities, but we have extreme difficulties and obstacles that we do not know anymore how to overcome them. I'm talking about the kid sleeping in a car before going to school. This is a horrible example. Or the one not going to canteen because money is used to pay the rent. Nicolas Joly from ICAD. Is this the real poverty pattern? We have this problem of livelihood, accommodation, poverty, schooling. The thing is, not everyone has a roof above their heads, right? Yes. It's not always true that everyone has a roof over their heads, and it's for 70 years we've had this crisis and we see that it's actually a topical subject, and poverty affects everyone and has an impact on every other subject, and we can see a population that is getting poorer and poorer, and housing is more and more a problem. Housing is 22% of income. It increased by 50% in 10 years. Before it was 10% of the income. So, as Caroline said, it actually weighs upon the rest as to filling and essential needs. And this is why we have new phases of poverty related to housing. I'm going to talk about the example that we saw with Adoma, which is the branch of CDC Habitat dedicated to housing and emergency accommodation. And we could see that we have a poverty that affects more and more young people and more female population. Traditionally, we had more senior people, elderly people. We have young people accounting for 13%. It's 18 to 30 now. It's a new entrance out of 3 that is actually relating to young people. Before, for women, it was 15%. Now it's 1 out of 4 people. And 1 out of 3 young female in the population. So things are speeding up. And to give you another illustration, beyond extreme poverty, you have the issue of social housing, which we're talking about 2.7 million people that are on the waiting list for social housing. That's an increase by 50% spanning 10 years. We were talking about the COVID effect, but since COVID, this has been ramping up with more 6% every year. And this has an impact. And it is widespreading to other issues. So we have problems relating to accessibility to housing. People stay in social housing, then cannot manage to get out of social housing to manage to pay rent in private residence or to buy property to become owners. And so you have a waiting list becoming bigger and bigger, and that actually widens the social gap. So when we talk about student housing, it's a crisis within the crisis. So we often quote the examples of strong figures where you have 600 applications in Paris, up to 1,400 if we believe PAP, and we have to be closer to schools, so the conditions are stricter. And then you have bad housing, you have no choice in the housing. And if you cannot manage to find housing, this has an impact on labor market. Because if you're a student and you cannot find the right and proper housing, you are on the sideline. That means that you will feed those that are without job, without training, without academic achievements, and you're going to be a part of the waiting list, and you're going to be a new face of poverty. So more than ever, the housing is an essential need, and it's actually an important factor of poverty. So, les Restos du Cœur, in 1980 on Europa, Coluche created this soup kitchen for everyone with the idea that one day it would stop. But unfortunately, not only has it not stopped, but it is actually getting worse. Thank you. It's going to be 40 years, the 26th of September 87. We all heard that 85. So if maybe they said we could create this new soup kitchen, and they distributed 8,500,000 lunches. And this year it's 162 million. So when we talk about poverty in our country, it accounted for 1.3 million people. 5 years ago, it was 875,000 people. When we look at these figures, remember, we're talking about men, women, kids. And we have seen this worsening, as you recalled it earlier, since COVID. COVID was not a booming point of poverty because there were a lot of breaks, but it was an aggravation of all situations that were already in existence, because they were right on the cliff of precarity, and that was actually a turning point. And for going towards lasting poverty, you're talking about 23, 22, we're talking about geopolitical crisis. All crises have an impact on the most vulnerable groups. 2008, it was 25% uptake of people being sheltered, and this level of increase, we saw it in 22, 23 in a few months' time. 200 people joined the Restos du Cœur and solidarity associations. And the public is the same as 40 years ago when Coluche created the Restos du Cœur. Let's remind us that we had 200,000 jobless people, and now we have even more. And we were talking about the new poor. Now they're not brand new. They're just many more. So this is the idea of relative poverty. Yes, absolutely. So we have 50% of the people that we are welcoming under the age of 25. So youth is a real problem, and childhood is important. We don't want to make them the adults of tomorrow going to the soup kitchen tomorrow. So that's not the typical profile. You wonder what happened to you, and they say that I can't make it anymore. I couldn't say the typical profile, because people are coming to us and say, please help me, take my hand, so that I can get out of it, that I can go through. And we see people that are retired, that had to use out all their savings during the crisis to help their grandchildren. And they were not at the soup kitchen anymore, and they're coming back again. And then we see also the kids with problems related to employment, to health, to housing. And the difficulty of associations is to play by ear, because they have no certainties whatsoever. So at first it was a small truck. If someone has a small truck or a car they're not using, maybe we can bring books and so on. So you started with a small association, and now you're a full-scope association, 75,000 volunteers full-time. We also have people helping us, and 2,340 venues in France everywhere. Yes. And since COVID, we have also developed we have traveling sites, because when you have nothing to put in your fridge, then you can't actually you can't drive, because you can't pay for the oil. And this is the problem with poverty. It's the boys next door. This is what Nicolas said earlier. Nicolas, the one paying, but he's paying for the retired people. He's paying for so many, and he's taxed more and more. So Nicolas, who's paying, will go to the soup kitchen at one point, because he can't make both ends meet at the end of the month anymore. And this is why you see it through and through. So we have talked about poverty specifically in France. Now we still have half an hour to talk about the solutions. We have the solutions that are already in place. Nicolas Jacquet talked about it, and I thank him for this. Augustin said that companies have different programs via CSR. There was a round table on this before. This is also impacted. And it's not that they can, but they have to act. It's a duty to act. I don't know if Pierre Jacquet should take the floor again, or are you there as just a censor? No, if you want me to take the floor, I shall. Can you say a few words on the solutions that are visible today, and where should we head ourselves to reach that?
I don't think there are a lot of solutions. What I believe in is understanding the problem, and solutions and actions come next. We can all agree here that we need to reduce poverty, but if we don't agree how to go forward, we won't take many steps forward. So, to respond to what was said about the Restos du Cœur, I'd be interested to hear what struggles you have to put that in place. I'm delighted to hear that you've got so many volunteers. Is that a constraint to your future growth, and what is your development strategy? I would like not to have to talk about development and growth, because we're a charity. The idea that our founder had was to see poverty ended quickly. But over the last few years, and particularly since COVID, we've understood that we needed to strengthen our organization in order to protect the 1.3 million people who are counting on this. So there are key issues. The financial issues are significant. We are highly dependent on public funding, not just the state, but on people and businesses who support us. A lot of our donors are not hugely well off, but they're very generous, and when they're struggling to buy their shopping at the supermarket, they'll think twice about making a gift. And then volunteers, we've got a lot of historical volunteers, like all charities, and that needs to move forward. And in order to continue all of our work beyond our food aid, and perhaps I'll be able to talk about the support activities that we offer as well, our challenge is to recruit and continue to train volunteers. Well, let's not talk about solutions. Let's talk about actions, current actions and future actions. We've got 27 minutes exactly. So, Augustin de Roumanie, are there some public policies which are effective in ending poverty, and how things working and what we do better? Let's talk about the world and talk about France as well. In terms of combating poverty around the world, I'd point you to an article in the French newspaper Libération from Thursday last week. Mr. Banerjee works at MIT. He's married to Esther Duflo, who's a minister in France. He said, as development economists, we haven't talked enough about the importance of multilateral cooperation. Given the threats from Donald Trump, economists are realizing that things which seem obvious, reducing poverty around the world through multilateral action, France has obviously played a role, because Jacques Chirac created the air ticket tax, which enabled us to make meet one of the Sustainable Development Objectives, which is the near eradication of AIDS. So with respect to multilateral action, we need to be very careful that we don't forget the issues here. Within our companies, we have around 5 to 10% of our staff who are in a situation of poverty. Between 8 and 10%, 16% are digital illiterates. So that's a key thing. What Esther Duflo said in terms of capacity for action needs to be used for not only for multilateral aid but also for domestic aid. So 5 criteria. Efficiency is not just about how much but about how. Second point, testing and experimenting is very useful. If you take the example of vaccination in India, take 3 populations. One population where there's no incentive, 6% of children are vaccinated. Take another part of the population which sees a vaccination truck coming around every month, 18% of the population. And if you see there's a sample of the population who get a bag of lentils for every child that is vaccinated. It's a non-monetary incentive. 38% of the population are vaccinated. There are counterintuitive strategies you need to know about. In India, poor people would prefer to fund a wedding for social prestige than to fund latrine. Fourth point, we need simple, easy solutions. And fifth point, we need local buy-in. That's my key thing. That was my second point. My third observation is that the poverty reduction policies developed in France since 2018 are good policies. There are some reports by the ministerial delegation, and we're focusing more on prevention than on cure. That's a good thing, but there's a lot more work to be done in terms of ensuring that local authorities become responsible. One of the new things is a local rollout of policy. I want to talk about a very banal issue. In the Middle Ages, there were very few poor people in a village, because when you have close relations with the people who live around you, you can't really be homeless or hungry or lacking in education. But when you live in big cities and agglomerations, there are significant risks of loneliness and lack of personal relationship. I don't want to take too long. I'll answer other questions later. I didn't have to cut you off this time. That's a bit new for you, Augustin. Nicolas Joly, when we talk about housing, you said that there were 2.5 million French people waiting for social housing. That's a lot. It's actually 2.7 million. Yes, it's massive. So what are we doing about that? There are 2 types of response. So there are individual responses. As businesses, we have responsibilities, but there's another level, the ecosystem that we work in. Other companies, groups, on the local or national level. Let me give you a few examples. What are we doing on an individual level? I can talk about how we need to unblock the housing pathway for people who can't find their way onto the housing ladder. So there are some initiatives that we're starting, new forms of ownership, such as the solidarity tenancy. It enables people to become homeowners for 30 to 40% less than if they were buying the whole property. It's perhaps a new approach in France, but we're seeing that in some of the development operations we're running. We've started working with a local organization in the Saint-Denis area north of Paris, and we created our own foundation in Chambéry as well. We're starting a new project there. So that's the first type of initiative we can think about. Another thing is that we need to build in inclusion for all in any property development program. When we did, we talked about Adoma, which is a subsidiary of the Caisse des Dépôts, focusing on emergency housing and who sees every day these new faces of poverty. And in the Olympic athletes village, we have developed new housing up to the same standards of housing that we build out elsewhere. The same quality in terms of energy use, energy efficiency. I was also talking about work on an ecosystem level. We need to work hand in hand with housing associations. So within ICAD, we're part of a bigger group that I just mentioned, the Caisse des Dépôts, which funds 2 houses in 5 in France, the biggest stakeholder in social housing in France. So there's a real active work that we do in combating poverty there. We're also an investor. We have clients that have offices that are taking some initiatives. I'm thinking of AXA in the La Défense area near Paris. It's working with a company called Bureau Solidaire. So offices that are not used at night can be used as temporary housing for homeless people who haven't got a roof over their heads. So these types of initiatives are things that we like to encourage. We're working as well with the authorities in order to try to enable greater access to private housing stock with some thinking that's going on within the housing ministry about how we can increase access to private owned properties. There are French people who want to invest in buy-to-let. They're aware of the housing crisis, and we want to give them ways they can do that. Pierre Douré, the role of the Restos du Cœur charity is not just as a food provider. You offer human resources, perhaps some psychological support. Is it a new role? Well, it's not completely new. At the moment, the charity was founded, we talked about inclusion. We don't want the people who come and knock on our door to stay with us for a long time. So we've provided support activities to help people alongside the food assistance, which is the first step on the ladder. We help people looking for jobs. We help them to look for schools for their kids. We help them with their self-esteem. We try to make clothes available to people who are very much in need, help them to write CVs, perhaps get their hair cut by a volunteer hairdresser. That might help them to get training or an interview with an employer. All of these aspects will enable us to help people who are struggling to get back on track for a normal life. And the other thing that we do is 100 employability workshop. A lot of that focuses on fruit and vegetable growing without chemical inputs. We're taking responsibility in terms of environmental transition, and so that represents around 15% of the food that we give out in our network. So we wanted to build up new partnerships with the Public Employment Service, with the Social Security Organization, in order to help people in difficulty find new pathways into work. Caroline Cheuvret, in terms of public policy, we seen changes to mean that children have to go to nursery school from 3 years old. What do you see in terms of public policy and poverty? If we focus in on education, I think we're at a turning point today. The relationship of the French population with the education system, which has been inspired by the national resistance, but which has rolled out greater in the 1970s with a form of social compromise. This approach considers that we don't want an education system that would lead to poor schools for the poor and high-performing education system for the rich. There's a kind of compromise that was built from the 70s onwards, which has was embodied in the 1989 Act on Schooling, and that's led to political choices in favour of a dynamic education system whereby the same targets are set for all children, for all young people, and the aim was for 80% of people to access the baccalaureate and 50% of people to get a bachelor's degree. All of this has led to an education system which gives more to those who have less. That's been the philosophy until fairly recently, I would say, in France, in particular with priority education policies. When we talk about priority education policies, we often think it's focusing on tough neighborhoods in cities, but it also focuses on rural areas that are poorer. And the most recent map of priority education with primary schools and secondary schools are supported goes back to 2016. If we think about the way that society and the economy has changed, what we can see is there is no longer focus on priority education in certain parts of the country, and the high schools are no longer part of the school, as if education stopped at the age of 15, 16 in France. We are at a turning point today because it will be vital to come back to the idea of a public service whereby the targets are the same for everyone. Currently, we're seeing private education growing exponentially. There's a recent bill that's been brought before the Parliament just a few days ago, which should enable private higher education establishments to issue degrees and diplomas. And you talked about the decision to make nursery education mandatory from 3 years old, but 90% of children were already going to nursery school from 3 years old. But there was a correlation of this decision. It allowed local authorities to fund private nurseries, and that wasn't part of their competencies. Yes, there are always side effects, aren't there? There was no big effect on school attendance for 3 years old children. Children attending school from 3 years old is a really great way to lift people out of poverty. However, what it did do was allow funding for private nurseries. Currently, state nurseries can welcome all the pupils, so it's not particularly beneficial for society to have private nurseries developing to separate people up. So we're taking resources out of state education, which needs extra resourcing, and we need to focus on the public sector. Let's take the next 10, 12 minutes to focus on some of what has been said. I want to give the floor back to Augustin de Romanet about reinventing public policy. I had a rather disruptive thing to say. I think it's really important to have policies focused on objectives and targets. The object of 80% of pupils having the baccalaureate is a tragedy. Higher education degree, 50% target is a tragedy. Someone with 5 years of higher education has less of a good outlook than someone with 3 years in higher education 20 years ago. It's a tragedy. What would you say? The problem is that the means weren't provided. We've never given secondary school pupils from poor backgrounds the means that were given to the middle-class students in the 1970s. So, yes, we've increased difficulties. You're asking for the roots, the deep-lying causes. Within the ADP group, when I was there, we were helping an association called 1001 mots, which says that the development capabilities of a child will vary widely depending on how many words they heard between the ages of 0 and 3 years. The idea is to get local authorities to encourage parents to read their kids' stories so they can hear words. Children who are always sat in front of a tablet or a screen will have a different experience to the child who has had stories read to them every day. The child who's heard stories will have heard 2 million more words than the child who hasn't had stories read to them. So we need to go to the root of things. That's the first thing I would say. And all of the work carried out by this charity is a really good thing. Second observation, we need to get ready for the tidal wave of AI. It's going to be something that turns education upside down. I don't know what the solutions are going to be, but we're going to need to do with AI what Indians did with the telephone. Indians went from no telephones to mobile phones. They talk about the way they leapfrogged the landline phones phase. We need to leapfrog children from poor backgrounds who don't get stories read to them and have a real difficulty in education by using AI. What does that mean? We need to keep teaching humanities, philosophy, critical thinking, all of these skills that are going to be vital in order to compensate for the dumbing down that we're going to find when ChatGPT writes your essay or your dissertation. That's an issue which is going to give rise to lots of doctoral research in educational science. I think we need to rethink education, particularly for those who are struggling the most with reading, and take into account the impact of AI. Third point, my last one, is that one of the things we're lacking in society is a sense of responsibility. No one takes responsibility for anything, and in terms of poverty, we need to think about local responsibility. Each one of us should feel accountable for people living on the same staircase, in the same block of flats, or in the local area. So that people living alongside us can find a pathway forward. Thank you. People are responding warmly to your final point. Luc Julia recently said before the French Senate he created Siri on chat or on the Apple iOS, and it's really interesting to hear what he said. You could see it online. He explains exactly how ChatGPT is dumbing us all down and how important it will be to combat this. And I think with what you said about 0 to 3 years old, someone said to Albert Einstein, and the mother said to him, "My child wants to learn French." Albert Einstein said, "How old is the child?" The mother said, 3 years. He said, "It's too late." So that illustrates what you said. Caroline Chevret is rolling her eyes. You obviously don't share this opinion. You're the next person to take the floor. Are we living in an old-fashioned world? Do we need to throw everything out and start again? What would you say to businesses? We talk a lot about the state, the welfare state, but can things be changed with the participation of businesses? Well, I rolled my eyes because not everyone is a teacher, not everyone is an educator. It's not too late, clearly, to train and educate a child who is 3 years old. Sometimes things are exaggerated, and that might even be the case for Albert Einstein from time to time. We need to consider that education is an absolutely crucial factor for getting out of poverty. When we take into account the fact that education is not just what happens in the classroom, it's also about everything that happens around the classroom, outside of the classroom, everything that means that a child can come into class in the morning in a position where they are ready to learn. The use of screens is a key issue. This kind of magical thinking around artificial intelligence, providing cheaper options for education, that would mean putting kids in front of a screen even longer, so that would be a real challenge. So probably we will need a real change of policy in order to think differently about equality policies. There will be no way out of policy without thinking about the reduction of inequalities and focus on a future where equality really means something. Nicolas Joly. One thing that we haven't talked about is having an address. Having an address is important for a bank account, for having a mobile phone. It's really important in 2025, and that's something that you're working on. Yes, indeed. Having an address, a roof over one's head is an essential need, and we've seen how much that can have an impact on other essential needs because of the impact on income, for example. For our sector, the housing sector, the challenges are now and in the future. When we build a house will meet a need today, the current housing crisis, but it also enables people to look ahead 20, 30 years, building towns that will still be here by 2030, 2050. And we know that by 2050, in the next 30 years, there'll be major changes in the population, demographic makeup of households and communities. Household sizes are getting smaller. People's practices are changing. The population is aging. All of these environmental factors will lead to major population changes across the territory. So our issue is how will we respond to today's urgent needs while we still think about the future. So the challenge is to do those two things together. Within the sector, if I say to you what's the biggest industry in France, not many people will say that it is the town-making industry, the city-making industry. It's 10% of GDP. That's how difficult it is to think about our sector as a whole. For big problems, we need global responses. Pierre Douré, what would you say? What's your wish for the future? If I had one wish, it would be that we don't need charities to do essential work in our society. But I would agree with what Augustin said, that we need to continue to support people who are in need. We need to hold out our hands without pointing a finger. We need to focus on childhood, early years, because when you meet a mum coming into a soup kitchen with their pushchair and their baby, and she says, things changed here. I can remember what it was like when my mum came 25 years ago. I don't like hearing that. If we don't do anything, the baby in the pushchair will be, in 20 years, the mum that comes to the soup kitchen 20 years' time. I hope that soup kitchen won't have to exist in 20 years' time. This is what we need to focus on. We want to ensure that today's babies are not looked after children in social services in the future. So we need to provide support for children. It's about social relationships, supporting single mums. And I need to remind everyone of the importance of public authorities. Charities, people say, cost a lot of money, but they can measure what they do. When the state puts in €1 into the Resto du Cœur, 4 to 5 times more is spent across the territory. So the responsibility, as was said very clearly, is to focus on prevention and fight poverty right at the root of the causes. So investment in social causes. Let me hand over to Pierre Jacquet to wrap up for us. Thank you very much. I want to leave you with 5 ideas, 5 messages I picked up from today's discussion. The first one is that when we hear trickle down as economists, we think of wealth trickling down through society. But I feel like it's poverty that's trickling through our society. It's trickling through in a dynamic way. When people are poor, it has an impact on food consumption, on education. It has an impact that creates a vicious circle which is perpetuated over time, and the next generation suffers from it as well. So there's a perverse kind of dynamic. So poverty is not just a set of statistics we look at, it's an individual dynamic, and it can't necessarily be tackled with an overall macroeconomic approach. The second important thing that we heard is the importance of focusing on youth, this is a major theme for our rencontre here in Aix. Pour young people means that we are storing up trouble for the future. Young people are our future. We'll be endangering our society if they remain in poverty. This theme of youth is an issue not just for France, but for the world. Africa's young people are an opportunity, but also a major challenge. The third key idea is the role of business. I heard this very clearly, particularly from Augustin. Businesses are local stakeholders in society, but I also think that in the future we need to make sure that societal objectives, environmental objectives, are not only the responsibility of our governments, but are taken on as collective responsibility for all players in societies. Businesses have their own rationale, they have to make profit, but they're part of achieving our collective societal objectives. Fourth comment, even though time is running out, is the importance of the local combat, local struggle against poverty. And the final point, public development aid. Thank you to Augustin for showing how effective it is. The idea of this should be to mean that in the future it isn't needed anymore, but because times are hard, I think that such assistance mechanisms will still be needed. We need to welcome them. I'm sorry, we haven't got time for questions, but do feel free to go and see our speakers afterwards. Thank you very much.